The conversation about empathy in the workplace doesn't end with definitions or even discussing our past experiences with empathetic leaders. In fact, it really begins when we start talking about how to make it a reality for our employees, colleagues, and even our customers. And that's why I am very pleased to be joined today by Katharine Manning. Her book, The Empathetic Workplace, is what I think of as a user's manual for anyone wanting to lead with empathy. She has a wealth of experience responding to people in crisis and has translated that experience into practical steps and techniques. Welcome, Katharine. Thank you so much for joining me for today's conversation. If you want to introduce yourself or just dive in, I'd love to hand the reins over to you for a moment.
Well, it is such a pleasure to be here. I'm honored to be having this conversation. These topics are so near and dear to my heart, so important, and I'm just thrilled. So let's just dive in.
Let's go. I'd like to start, even though I said it, the conversation doesn't stop with definitions. I always like to start with, let's define our terms. Let's make certain we're on the same page in terms of the language we're using and our understanding of it. So I'm curious how you what's your working definition of empathy, and what do you think the function of empathy in the workplace is?
Often when people talk about empathy, they say things like it's seeing the world through somebody else's eyes or standing in someone else's shoes. And while I think that would be amazing, like I wish, right? I wish I could really experience the world through somebody else's shoes and, somebody else's eyes. I know that's not really possible. So what I really think of as empathy is, it's like a striving. It's a striving to understand somebody else's perspective and experience. It's an understanding um, that you are interacting with a human. I think of empathetic leadership as an understanding that you are you are there to work with the humans in your environment, and you are striving to provide them with the support that they need to thrive. That's really what I mean by empathy and leading in an empathetic way.
That excites me to hear. I love the word striving. It's poetic, but it also has this sense of you don't reach completion. It's continual. I tend to think of empathy as an act of imagination. There's what happens in us physiologically, the science that's been uncovered in the last few decades around mirror neurons, and the fact that we experience what we see other people doing and feeling as well, which is just wild and eerie to think about. But then beyond the thing that happens automatically in our cells, in our brains, there is effort that goes into. The more I think and write about empathy, I believe leadership empathy is holistic in that it is both thought and feeling. That there has to be a discipline around how you process the emotional side of it, and the striving to understand, the constantly attempting to take someone else's perspective. And your point too, that it would be lovely if we could really effectively do it, but there's always guesswork involved. And leaders have to be curious if they're really going to be empathetic. Otherwise, it's presumption, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, curiosity, I think, is at the heart of empathy.
I do too.
And it means staying present and open. Listening is at the center of empathy.
Yeah. What I love about the discussion of empathy, and I know we're still kind of in the concept and theory at this point, is that it really subverts the idea of what are the soft skills and the hard skills, because empathy does require rigor. It's not just sitting back and feeling things. You have to be curious. You have to be proactive. You have to apply all of your talents as a leader, both mental and emotional, to the work at hand. And it's because people are human. We don't drop things at the door when we come to work. I'm embarrassed to admit, in my early years as an HR person, that was my attitude. Leave your baggage at the door. You're at work. I'm glad that I've mellowed and understand it's different now. But I think that's part of why we have to talk about empathy so much, is because we work with humans and we are humans trying to lead.
Yeah, I mean, it's really uncomfortable sometimes. It's
Right?
difficult. It
Yeah.
can be really, really hard.
Mm-hmm.
And there are times where it means that we have to do and act in ways that feel really uncomfortable and strange to us
Mm-hmm.
because that is what is required by this human that is sitting across the desk from us,
Mm-hmm.
because their style of communication is very different from ours. But that's what they need in order to really understand what we're trying to get across. Um, I think sometimes about, there are like people who require a much more blunt style of
Mm-hmm.
communication than I generally do or am comfortable with. And I've had to learn sometimes I need to be that that kind of blunt, or I will not get my point across to those people.
Mm-hmm.
And I know, even though that maybe is not what's comfortable to me, if I am going to get across the important information that I need them to understand, and that they need to understand, that is important for them to get, I have to be as blunt as they
Mm-hmm.
need me to be, or else they're going to miss it, right?
Yeah.
Um, And so that's what I mean. And sometimes it means saying things in a way that, for somebody else, maybe it means being more nuanced or something in a way that feels to them very wishy-washy. Well, why do I have to talk this way? We're all having to tiptoe around each other. Well, because that is what this interaction
Mm-hmm.
is going to be more effective. I think about um, this saying, that the effectiveness of communication is measured not at the speaker's mouth, but at the listener's
Mm.
ear.
Yes.
And so if you are only saying, "Well, I said it," and it's up to them whether or not they got it or not. No, that's not effective communication.
It is not. Yeah. I think we have to recognize that adapting your style is fundamental to being effective at demonstrating care and leadership, which in my philosophy, kind of the theory and framework I've set up, is the first essential. That we start with vulnerability so we can build trust, then empathy comes into play, and then as a little teaser, next month we'll talk kind of about attitude, what I'm calling good humor. That those are the things that make it possible for you to demonstrate care to your employees. And it's things like caring about, how does what I say land? How safe do you feel communicating with me? Am I adjusting my approach in a way that meets what your needs are? And it doesn't mean that you have to totally be a chameleon, but having that mental agility and like style flexibility is important. And by my lights, that doesn't happen without empathy,
Mhm.
because it lets you experience and imagine what it could be like for the other person. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And checking in all the time.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Are you with
Yeah.
me? Does this make sense so far? What do you need right now?
Yeah. We're kind of getting to what I think is the real crux of the conversation I want to have, but let me name it. And sort of strong arm us there, because I know, for my part at least, it would be very easy to spend a lot of time talking about kind of the human case or even the business case for empathy. And what's really important is moving to action with it. Not just, oh, I have a feeling and I sit with it, but what are the observable behaviors, the skills and mindsets that benefit leaders in this space? Is something I noted in the first episode this month, introducing empathy as a leadership essential, is that you have to become the embodiment of care. But what does that actually look like in the day to day?
Oh, I love talking about practical
Yes.
skills, Kate. So some of the things that I think are pretty essential for leaders to get in the habit of are one, check-ins, right?
Yes.
So I think it's essential for every manager for sure, but really everybody in the workplace to master the art of the quick check-in, to be able to check in on their team members pretty regularly. I mean, the research is that psychological safety is highest on teams where supervisors check in on their direct reports at least once a week. So that's kind of what we should be aiming for. Um, if you have a huge number of direct reports and that's not feasible, there are ways where you could do it maybe, you know, every other week, or you could do
Mm-hmm.
it through, Google Forms. Like there's a thing called 15.5 form, something like that. And then you just use the check-in, it kind of saves time with the check-in. You could do it more briefly. But the idea is you want to have an ongoing conversation with your people so that they know that it's okay to raise issues with you.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, it needs to not be difficult to know where to go when something arises, whether that's a work issue, I've hit a roadblock on this project and I don't know what to do about it, or something at home, like, hey, you should be aware that there's some problem that I'm encountering and it's going to be
Yeah.
difficult for me over the next few weeks for this reason. So you need to create space for those conversations to happen. Another thing that I think is really helpful is to have some kind of team vernacular, like a language that everybody
Oh,
is comfortable with,
I love that.
is a way for people to say how they are doing without having to go into details that they might not be comfortable sharing. So I've seen teams where they do like a numeric, like, oh, I'm at like an 8 today. It's been a great week. Or people saying like, I'm like a 2. It's been hard. Or I've seen teams where they do a weather report, like, it was sunny skies, and then out of nowhere, this like typhoon came in,
Oh,
you know?
yeah.
So there are different ways, and it can be whatever makes sense for your team. But just something that allows people to kind of raise a hand and say, you know what, I'm going to need a little extra space, a little extra grace this week,
Mm-hmm.
without necessarily having to go into what is actually going on until they're ready to share it. That also allows you, as the leader, to check in on them later in a more private moment, maybe, and say, hey, I noticed that you said it was a little bit of a rough week. I just wanted to see how you're doing. Is there anything, you need help with?
Yeah.
Remember, I'm around and I'm happy to help if there's anything.
The footnote, if I may interrupt, I would add to that is making it safe for people to be authentic in those moments too. Not relying on one bold person to be the first one to be like, I'm at a 1 today, and not making it a huge deal, but using that check in to be able to say, what do you need? This isn't, it's okay that you're there. We don't expect you to put on a fake facade for us. And this is what I want us to model, that when we're at a 1, we're honest with each other and we do what we need to get to a different level of it. Like if you're only hearing 10s from people, if the forecast is always sunny, that tells you that you're probably missing something in terms of safety, and you need to start sort of ramping up your attention to the emotions and the interactions on your team.
Yeah, absolutely. And the weather report example came from a team that over COVID, they had started with I think it was like share your sunshine. That's how they would
Mm.
end every team meeting. Share something that, went well this week. And they realized that it was veering into toxic positivity because
Mm-hmm.
they were like, actually, I'm not feeling very sunny right now. This has been a really hard week. And what feels more authentic to me is sometimes what I'm feeling is pretty cloudy, and that's what feels more honest. And I thought, what a great honest team, how
It is.
wonderful that they have felt comfortable having that authentic conversation. But I totally agree with you, Kate. And I think actually it's important for leaders to lead on this point
I
and
agree.
to model it and say sometimes authentically. I mean, you don't make it up, but like, guys, I'm at a one this week. Um, and so a couple things. One, when I say leader, I don't mean necessarily like a job title leader.
Agreed.
Like we all are leaders,
Yes.
we lead from where we sit by the ways that we show up. Um, that said, if you are the job title leader, like if you are the manager of the team, the supervisor, let me do one little caveat. Um, I think if you are the manager of the team, it is important that you model vulnerability because you really are showing people that it is okay. So to be the one or the two or whatever it is. And also, it is important to be mindful about venting to your team.
Thank you.
Um, because now you're always going to vent to your team. Sometimes you spend a lot of time with them. And so I'm not going to say like you can never do that. Um, and let me be clear the difference between them. So modeling vulnerability is like, guys, I have to admit I'm like at a two this week. It's been just, I've had a lot going on at home and um, just have to warn you, you might have to nudge me if you need responses on some things. And I apologize for that in advance. That is modeling vulnerability. Venting is, you would not believe what my mother said to me last night,
Mm-hmm.
and then going on
Yep.
about that, right?
Yeah.
That's venting, right?
Yeah.
Now, like, can I say, like, you never vent to your staff? Like, you do, again, you spend a lot of time with them, but be cognizant of the fact that these people work for you and they don't have the ability to say, you know what, I have to get back to my work now.
Yes. That's
It is
exactly
very
right.
difficult, at least more difficult for them to set boundaries with you.
Yeah.
And so be cognizant of that. And it might not be appropriate, right? Like so instead, think about venting to your colleague who's on a different staff, who's maybe
Mm-hmm.
on the same level as you, or your friend, your spouse, somebody who's outside the workplace, not
Exactly.
to somebody who reports to you. Model vulnerability for sure to the people who report to you, but venting outside, I
Yeah.
think, is what we're aiming for.
Well, and vulnerability doesn't mean everything's on display. It means that you admit to I'm human as well.
Yeah.
I have soft places that can be hurt. I have I have weaknesses. I have problems just like you do. And I love that distinction between you model it but you don't offload the hard stuff
Mhm.
on people, and especially if it's getting in the way of work, you're you're the leader. You're on the job. The job is to make certain work's getting done with humans. So it's accounting for all those bits and pieces. Yeah. Thank you, Catherine, for that. It I keep being reminded of something in the very early pages of your book that was an aha for me, and I think this is the right place to bring it up, because I know in talking about care and vulnerability and empathy, we're in the space of discussing what a trauma informed workplace looks like, what trauma informed leadership can look like. And When I was reading uh, The Empathetic Workplace, it was page 5. Right off the bat, I had this moment of, I have to stop and rethink something here. Um, you say, I begin to realize something. All trauma is fundamentally the same. And I had such a visceral response to that because I know I've categorized trauma like, oh, the bad things I've experienced in my life, it could be worse. It's not like a soldier coming back from war. That's always been, and it's probably because I'm a military brat. That's always my level of trauma, is somebody that survived combat, and everything else falls below that, which is arbitrary if you think about it. But what I realized, and the metaphor that came to me when I was working through that response I had, was it's like comparing a paper cut to a knife wound. The severity is very different. The necessary intervention and healing, very different. But in both cases, there's been a breach of what protects us. And I think it's important to talk about severity and healing when we talk about empathy, because the human condition carries trauma with it. Some of us are very fortunate and we've only encountered paper cuts. But you're also going to have people on your team that are at the other end of that spectrum. And you can adapt your response, and intervention doesn't feel like quite the right word, but it's the only one coming to mind, based on the need of the person. And the mechanism for that is relying on empathy, whether it's affective or cognitive in your leadership. That's a lot of me talking. I would love to hear from you some of the ways that doing that, what it looks like in the moment when there's a direct response to an employee sharing trauma with you.
First of all, I love that metaphor. What a great way of making it so tangible. And I totally agree that that is like such a perfect way of analogizing it. When you are working with somebody, um, first of all, let's understand that what the research shows is that 70% of adults have experienced at least one trauma in their lives. And when we get to the point of older adulthood, elders, it's about 90%. So let's assume that most people have experienced trauma at least somewhere along the way. That means if you work with people, you're working with people who have experienced trauma, and some of them
Mm-hmm.
probably are experiencing some trauma right now. So,
Yeah.
um, you know, as you've said, so for some people, people are assuming that trauma means it's combat or sexual assault, right? Those are the only things that
Exactly.
count as trauma. But in reality, trauma can be a whole range of things. And the definition of trauma that I use in my work is any kind of psychological injury that impairs your ability to perform in the ways that you need and want to in your work. And that's really my focus in my work is let's get away from you tell me what you are going through and then I'll let you know whether that counts as trauma or not.
Yes.
You know,
Thank you.
we don't need to be deciding for one another what counts as trauma because a lot of us, can go through the exact same experience and come away from it very differently impacted because of our genetic makeup, because of our past experiences, for a whole host of reasons that we don't need to be wading into. It's not our business, right? So instead, let's just figure out, does this person in front of us need some support to be able to thrive, right? Remember, that's what we're aiming for. And if so, let's get them the support. So, as a sideline to that, I don't actually even really need to know the details of what happened to you,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So
Just freeing,
we
isn't
don't need
it?
to be, Yeah, we don't need to be like quizzing each other about our ACEs scores or the details of what happened and all of that. Like, I really, really, and this again is the point of my book. I want everybody in the workplace to have the skills to
Hmm.
be able to support each other if somebody chooses to share their story. But it is up to them. It is their
Hmm.
story to share or not. And if they choose not to, no problem. Like
Right.
that is totally up to them. And they don't owe it to anybody. And certainly I don't want others in the workplace like, oh, did you hear what happened to so and so? Like, definitely not. Like, let's all work a little bit harder on respecting privacy of one another as well. It's another thing that I think is really, really important for all of us to be kind of cognizant of um, along the way. So, when it comes to dealing with trauma in the workplace and the skills that we need um, to create a trauma-informed workplace, a lot of it is these empathy skills that we've been talking about. So checking in, right? You're
Yes.
doing these check-ins. You've created an environment where people already feel comfortable, like, okay, this is somebody who cares about me enough to check in on me regularly, not just about like, where's that report you owe me? But like, hey, how did soccer go this weekend? Or what are you reading right now?
Hmm.
That shows me that you care about me as a human. Now, maybe I feel comfortable talking to you about something more intensive, right? A diagnosis, or I'm going to be testifying this weekend about something that happened a
Yeah.
long time ago or something, right? Something that is potentially more traumatic, right? So now maybe there's a harder conversation. There's something that you should know. Okay, so you perhaps are somebody who is now receiving that disclosure in the workplace. So can I just kind of walk through the
Yes.
five steps?
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's exactly, I think, where we were naturally headed, and I'm quizzing
Yeah.
myself to see if I remember all of them.
Yeah. So these are the five steps to if you have that, somebody you work with comes to you and says, "Hey, there's something I just want you to be aware of that I'm in the middle of right now." So these are the five steps to an empathetic response to trauma on the job. So you are receiving a disclosure of trauma. Step one, it's the laser technique. Okay. So the five steps are LASER. First one is listen. So this is active listening. So it's more than just sitting there quietly and letting them talk. You're showing them that you care about what they are saying. So you are creating an environment where they feel comfortable opening up. So you are nodding. You are,
Hmm.
maybe showing through your body language that you are open to hearing this. So it's very common when we start to feel a little like tense about something that we unconsciously adopt a defensive stance. We cross our arms, maybe turn away a little bit, try to adopt an open and neutral body posture and facial expression. So keep facing them. Um, Ask open-ended questions that just show that it's okay to keep going. Like, what happened next and where were you? You're not giving them the third degree, you're just giving them permission to go on. Often people will tell you a little bit and then just see, do you actually want to hear this or not?
Hmm.
So you're just letting them know it really is okay to tell me. I'm willing to hear this. It is okay to tell me. Okay, so that's step one, listen. Two is acknowledge. This is just letting them know I hear you. So often we like just skip right by that because we're thinking about like problem solving or something.
Hmm.
Next steps, really, 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 people need to know that they have been heard. It's so simple, but everything hangs on this. A simple statement like, thanks for letting me know. I'm really sorry you're going through all that. Really, really simple. And I promise you, having worked with victims of crime for, gosh, like 30 years, you will see the relief. Their shoulders will drop, just this, oh, finally somebody hears me.
Hmm.
Um, what you want to avoid are responses that either deny or distract from what they've just said. So denial is something like, it's all going to work out.
Hmm.
Distraction is something like, I went through something similar. Let me tell you about that. Right? Instead, just let them know that you heard them.
Yeah. And acknowledging doesn't have to include, you're absolutely right. This is horrible. Let's go take care of it, too. It's,
Yeah,
you're acknowledging you have told me something difficult.
I hear you.
Yeah.
Yep. I
Yeah.
hear you. That sounds awful or hard or whatever. Yeah. Just acknowledging it. Next step is, so first of all, those two steps will get you through most interactions, but sometimes the
Right.
person is coming to you for kind of support in the workplace, and you might need these extra steps. So the third step is share information back with them. This is to help them make sense of a situation that feels very out of control. So sharing information is like, sometimes factual information, like if there it was an episode of workplace violence, this is what we know about what happened. It could be process information, like where you go to file a complaint. Um, it might be even values information, like we take employee safety really seriously. That's
Mm-hmm.
values information. That kind of information can be helpful. The fourth step is empower, and this is about connecting them with resources that might be helpful for them in their own journey to heal. And the key here is kind of a boundary setting point that this is their journey, not yours. So you're not swooping in to take over.
Yeah.
So a great place to start is, what do you need right now, or how can I help? And then trying to connect them with those resources. So it might be that they're like, I think what would be helpful is I think I'm going to need some time off. So connecting them with, how do we find out about leave?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they want mental health resources, so connecting them with EAP or something like that, but trying to connect them with the things that they are looking for. And I hope everybody knows about 988, the mental health crisis line here in the US. And then the final step is R for return. So that was listen, acknowledge, share, empower, and R is return. And that's twofold. It's both literally returning to the person to check in on them later and let them know you continue to be a source of support. But also importantly, it's a return to ourselves, because supporting others takes a toll on us too. And we need to take a little bit of time to check in on ourselves, kind of return to our own equilibrium.
Mm-hmm.
Um, no, it's important that we
Yeah.
engage in some self-care as well.
Yeah. When I talk with leaders about empathy, most leadership skills, I am fond of saying, and it starts with you. And that includes empathy, that you need to have empathy for yourself, which is not to be a broken record, but I think that's why vulnerability is the place where you start, because you have to know, this is what hurts me, this is where I feel weak, so that when those spots are touched on, when you're facing your own trauma or burnout or any of the challenges of being human, but being a human who leads, that you deliver empathy to yourself, and then you know what it's like to do it, and you can understand the benefit of doing it for others. You start with you, turn your attention to the other person. Me, you. And I think that's one of the foundations of being an empathetic leader, is understanding that it's this constant interplay between what I'm there to do and what you need from me as the person you look to for direction.
Yeah, it's such a good point. And it kind of makes me think back on something you said earlier, which is that what happened to me is nowhere near as bad as what happened to that other person, which is something I hear all the time, sometimes from people who I think, what happened to you? Like, I can't even believe that you're still standing, and they're
Yeah.
like, oh, well, what happened to me is nothing compared to this other person, and I think so often about that, like, there's this almost impulse that, like, we don't want to take too much for ourselves or something, like we don't
Mm-hmm.
want to give to ourselves or something. And I don't know, I will say that, like, I never hear from somebody like, oh, it is such a relief to me that that other person over there is not taking care of themselves, like
Yes.
it's not better for them, right? And in fact, like, you taking care of yourself and being able to be whole and healthy and strong, you're more able to give to others, right? It's,
Mm-hmm.
the full cup spills over kind of thing.
Yeah.
Uh,
Oh, I like that so much more than the put your own mask on.
yeah.
That's wonderful. Yeah. Yeah. One of the things I appreciate about the laser method, the model that you've created and shared, thank you, there's this wonderful logical progression through it. In that moment when someone's sharing with you, well, the very first thing that you have a responsibility to do is to listen. And that's going to get you engaged in the process of leveraging empathy just from the start. Then acknowledging seems like, well, of course, someone said something to me, I need to respond. Well, let me respond with acknowledgement in a way to say I care about what you've told me. And as you notice, sometimes that's enough. That's where the interaction ends. But then, particularly when you have either a formal or an informal leadership position and people are looking to you for information and answers, that's what you get to do next. You share the information, you equip them to be empowered to care for themselves, and then follow up. And whether it's follow up with them or with myself after I've shut the door behind them, it's all very logical and very intuitive to what leaders need to be thinking about in terms of how they interact. And I like that for a circumstance where it's going to be tense and high emotion, because you don't have to pull out like extra special skills, right? These are things that you're already doing. It's just you're maybe ramping up. No, I really am going to put my phone down. I am really going to focus on this individual right now. But it's stuff you already know, leader. You don't have to be a superhero in that case.
I mean, I will say it's something that I've seen people be able to apply pretty quickly and effectively. I remember talking with this one guy. He reached out. This was kind of early in the pandemic. He's like a tech guy,
Mm-hmm.
a coder tech guy, a technology officer kind of guy. He's also an Asian American man, and he had written this code that would give him notices anytime there were um, instances of
Mm-hmm.
anti-Asian hate that appeared in the news. He would receive these notifications that had a victim's name, and he would reach out to the victim and offer support, say, I can connect you with resources, which is just like a phenomenal
Yeah.
like thing that he was doing for the service, right? But he had this problem, which is that he was like, I don't know anything about victimization or trauma or anything. He was like, I mean, I married my high school sweetheart. All my grandparents are alive. Like, I don't even really know anybody who's divorced. Like,
Yeah.
I knew nothing. And so he reached out to me and he was like, I don't want to mess this up. I don't know how to do this. And so I talked him through the laser technique, and he called me like a month later and he said, I got to tell you, this thing works. He said he had reached out to this woman. And what had happened to her was one of her neighbors was driving by her house and he was shooting a paint gun at her house, which is
Oh,
just terrifying, right? That it's
yeah.
like you have this thing being shot at your house. It's by a neighbor. So, like somebody that lives near you, you can't really get away from it.
It's
I'm
not
sure, terrifying.
random.
Gun shooting at your house, just awful.
And damage.
He said, yeah, exactly. Just terrifying. Um, and in your home, like where do you go, right? Um, so he said he spent maybe an hour on the phone with her and he walked through the laser technique. And he said at the end of the call, she said to him, I have spoken to police, to prosecutors, to journalists. And she said, nobody has made me feel heard and understood like you just did. Isn't that cool?
Oh, that's wonderful.
I feel like there's something pretty incredible about having the ability to support somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a stranger, right? Like
Yeah.
having the ability to support somebody when they really need it and knowing you have the skills to show up for somebody, that's really, really incredible.
It is. It is. And one of the things that we see, a fact of empathy, is that it encourages more empathy. when we experience it, it makes it possible for us to demonstrate it to others. So it's seed planting. It's creating this legacy of empathetic behavior. Empathy can be a lasting result on your team. It's as simple as listening and acknowledging people, checking in on a frequent basis, making it possible for people to share their ups and their downs.
Yeah, I mean, I recently gave a keynote at this general counsel's conference, and my kind of theme of the keynote is empathy is your greatest risk management tool.
Mm-hmm.
Because empathy builds trust and trust builds everything else. Like,
Yeah.
there is no way that you are going to be able to see around every corner, anticipate every challenge, unless you are getting the benefit of everybody's intelligence, sense, intuition.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody is operating on full octane, right?
Yeah.
Because they're actually, they're not so stressed all the time and anxious and walking on eggshells. Like, you're not going to get that benefit of the full throttle of your team without empathy.
I can't agree more. I'm curious, are there any other resources or tools that you recommend for listeners?
I have a text list if people want to get on it.
Oh, excellent.
So every Thursday at about noon Eastern time, I send out a text message that's about empathy and leadership and resilience. And if people want to join, you text the word blackbird, which is my company's name,
Yeah.
to 833-975-1945. It's free, just data right supply, I guess. And you can unsubscribe anytime.
I will be signing up for that.
I hope you do.
I will. I most definitely will. Katharine, I want to thank you again for your time, particularly with your scratchy throat, and I know how busy you are.
Thank you for putting up with it.
Oh no, it's all like gravelly and exciting. It's wonderful, but I hope it heals quickly.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Well Led Podcast. And special thanks to Katharine for sharing her time and insight. If this episode was useful, you can support the show by following or subscribing on your preferred podcast platform, or by sharing it with someone who's navigating similar leadership challenges. We'll be back next Tuesday with a lesson for effectiveness. And next month, we'll delve into the topic of practicing a good humor as a means of demonstrating care. Before you go, if you're thinking more about practical ways to demonstrate empathy and to build trust and connection, there's a free Vulnerability and Leadership Toolkit available at 123 Limited. These worksheets are a useful companion to this month's theme. Check the show notes for a link. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next week.